the good old summertime, in the good old summertime.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Golden Age of Cricket podcast. My name is Tom Ford. Of all the cricketers who played during the so-called Golden Age, none incite the intrigue in fans today quite like Sydney Francis Barnes. Blessed with a catalogue of unplayable deliveries, Barnes was the patron saint of the anti-establishment Cricket League. Those writers in the mid-20th century who looked back on this period with rose-coloured glasses often found the cantankerous win-at-all-costs attitude of Barnes to be at odds with the supposed spirit of the age. For Edwardian Britain, which elevated the amateur gentleman to a lofty playing status, Barnes's professional attitude to playing, and ultimately not playing first-class cricket, led him to have more than a couple of run-ins with the authority. Today, we'll attempt to better understand the personality and cricket career of a man who is still regarded as one of the greatest bowlers of all time. My guest today is Andy Searle, who is one of the most prolific publishers of cricket books in the UK. A graduate in history from the University of Lancaster and self-proclaimed cricket tragic, he has spent the last 50 plus years as scorer, player, administrator, writer, journalist, and reporter on his favourite pastime. For the last 10 years, he has lived in the Balkan Mountains in Bulgaria, where he has helped to establish a cricket club with his large family of dogs, cats, goats, chickens, and pigs. An accomplished wicketkeeper batsman, he still thinks that one day the England selectors will turn to him, despite being 63 years of age. In 1997, Andy wrote his book, S.F. Barnes, His Life and Times, and I'm thrilled he's my guest today. Hello, Andy.
Hi.
Thank you for joining the podcast. Let's begin right back at the beginning. Why Barnes? Why did you choose him as your subject?
History has always been my favourite subject. And at an early age, I got very involved with cricket. Even though my family weren't involved in cricket at all, we lived very near a cricket club. At one point, my father worked behind the bar at the cricket club. So I went down there. Very soon, I was the first 11 scorer at this club. It's Flixton Cricket Club in the Manchester Association in the Greater Manchester area. And I just developed an interest in cricket history. Used to borrow books from the library, and etc., etc. And Sydney Barnes's name came up on many occasions with the incredible records he'd achieved. And as time went by, as I graduated from university, I played lots of cricket. I eventually, in 1990, got a job as a sports reporter for a sports reporting company in Manchester. And my job interview entailed commentating on the England-India game at Old Trafford the week of my interview. And it was the game that Sachin Tendulkar got his first century in Test cricket. So that sparked my interest more, and I gradually started researching more, and decided eventually that I may have enough material to write a fully fledged biography of Barnes.
Yeah, fantastic. That's quite a story and quite an introduction to cricket. So when you came to write the biography, the book came out in 1997. I assume you started researching well before that. What literature already existed on Barnes, and were there any difficulties that you had to overcome in relation to accessing resources?
Well, I was amazed to find out. I always thought, because he was so famous, there would be plenty of literature on Barnes. But in fact, there were only two books existing at the time about Barnes. One was called Sydney Barnes, the Greatest Bowler of All Time, by a guy called Wilfred White. And that was produced in 1935, and it was no more than a mere pamphlet, and obviously coincided with pretty much the end of his career in cricket. And the second one, which was not much bigger, was by a journalist from Yorkshire called Leslie Duckworth, who used to watch Barnes play for Saltaire in the Bradford League. So most of his book was about Barnes's time in the Bradford League, and that was called Sydney Barnes, Master Bowler. But I got hold of copies of these almost immediately, but I decided not to read them till I'd actually researched and written my book. And as regards resources, I spent many hours at Manchester Central Library going through. They had a full collection of Wisdons, going through finding all the references to Barnes in all the Wisdons and everything, and there were multiple over almost 50 years. There are also two main newspapers or sporting papers at the time that carried lots of interesting features and articles, and that was the Sporting Chronicle and the Athletic News, and they were both available. All the issues of those two newspapers um, available on microfiche in Manchester
Mm.
Central Library. So I spent many hours trawling through a microfiche for reports and everything, and his life, certainly his career, was covered in a great detail throughout these in all this material. There were also numerous mentions of him in other people's biographies. As can see from my book, there are plenty of quotes from other famous cricketers of the time. So it was good. It was easy to find the information, but it was a long, hard slog. And as you say, it was published in 1997, but I actually started researching it in the early 90s. So
Mm.
it did take me 5 or 6 years from starting to research it till the book was actually published.
Yeah, I um I spent many hours in libraries during my university days on microfiche, and I certainly don't miss it at all. It's
Yeah,
you can set, you mean you can find the information you're after. It just can be hard to locate it. So yeah, not missing the microfiche at all. Andy, when it came to Barnes and your research, were there did he have any descendants that were able to assist you, or were there? This might be too far a stretch. Anyone alive at the time who perhaps remembered him?
yeah. Well, very early on, my work on this book, I showed chapters of this book to a friend of mine, and he was a mutual friend of a man called the Reverend Malcolm Lorimer, who was the cricket statistician and historian at Old Trafford. And he was amazed that someone was writing a book about Sydney Barnes. And I met Malcolm, and we've been friends ever since. And he, through a mutual contact of his in Staffordshire cricket, we tried to get hold of the family, his granddaughter and grandson, but um, it never happened. Mainly, I wanted to get some photographic material for the book,
Mm,
but it actually never worked out. I got the impression from the contact in Staffordshire cricket that I might be writing some sort of hatchet job on Sydney Barnes, because obviously by now I knew that he was quite a difficult character and everything, and this might come. And I know it does come over a little bit in the book. Well, basically, my aim was to show what his status was in the cricket world at the time, and he so it was difficult to get in touch with them. And by the time I'd written the book and everything and wanted to get it published, it was too late really to contact them. And I had to rely on archive material from
mm.
Lancashire County Cricket for the cricket club for the photographic content of the book. And that mainly came from Malcolm Lorimer.
It's interesting. Just listening to you then made me think because his prickly personality is quite well known and well documented. What he would have thought of a biographer and whether he himself would have been helpful or forthcoming. I have my answer. It would have been interesting whether, had he been around, whether he would have helped you or not. Just
Yeah, yeah, true.
interesting to consider.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your book, which I reread recently, and it's very good. Why? Well, what struck me as interesting is that you started your book with Barnes's selection for the 1901-02 tour of Australia, Ashes series in Australia. Why did you decide to start your book there?
Well, I suppose the main reason is that that's just such a fabulous story, even if it's not true. That Archie McCarron chooses Barnes, the boats have sailed off, they're going through the Bay of Biscay, there's a massive storm, and they think the boat's going to capsize, and Archie McLaren goes to. Most of the squad had never been to Australia before, never been on a boat before, and Archie McLaren turns to them and says, "If we do go down, at least that bugger Barnes will go down with us."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was just a fabulous story to start on, and I was very conscious when I was writing it. And obviously, I was writing it over a number of years to try and structure it. I didn't want it just to be chronological. I wanted to get the several themes in because are many themes in
Mm.
Barnes's life. His career with Staffordshire in the minor counties cricket, his long career in league cricket, his Test career. So I really needed to stitch it all together, and so I thought it might be good to start with that first entrance into the world cricket stage.
Yeah, and can you explain the context of this selection for the 1901-02 tour and the politics behind it, specifically the feud between Lord Hawke and the captain, Archie McLaren?
Well, at this time, it changed a couple of years after this tour, but at this time, the captain of the touring team chose the touring squad, and Archie McLaren was the captain. Uh, Barnes played a game at the end of the 1901 season for Lancashire and took 6 wickets in one innings, I think, and also bowled at McLaren in the nets. And there's a famous quote: "He hit me on the left pad, he hit me on the thigh, and he apologised to me, and I said, 'Don't be sorry, Barnes, you're coming to Australia with me.'"
Mm.
Also, probably an apocryphal quote.
Mm.
But Lancashire had got in trouble on the bowling front at this point by 1901. Johnny Briggs, who had a fabulous career for England, was in an asylum. He'd had a breakdown, a seizure on the field, and he was to die in early 1902. And Arthur Mould, who'd also had a good career for England as well as Lancashire, had been no-balled for throwing. So both of those two left. Their Lancashire's two main bowlers left the scene at the same time. So they were looking for new bowling resources, and Barnes was the person that McLaren came up with to replace these two bowlers.
So, Andy, what do we know about Barnes's early life? I mean, he was born in 1873, and as we mentioned, he makes his Test debut in 1901-02, so he's in his late 20s, which is not young for the time. So, but what do we know about his early life and his early influences? Did he come from a cricketing family, for example? And if not, was there someone else who you could attribute being his biggest influence?
He lived very near a cricket club, um, and he used to go down there. By all accounts, he started playing cricket at 15, which is quite a late age to start playing. Eventually, he was good enough to attract the attentions of the Smethwick club. He was from Smethwick, and he came under the influence of a coach called Billy Bird, who taught him to bowl fast.
Mm.
So he started off as a fast bowler, and then he came to the attention of Warwickshire. Played a few games for Warwickshire in the early 1890s, before Warwickshire were a first-class county, and without very much success, and then disappeared, but managed to get a professional contract in the Lancashire League at Rishton. Now, the Lancashire League at the time was becoming famous, but at the time it was only famous in England as a place for professional cricketers from other parts of the country to play. And at the time, you had to qualify to play for a county. You had to live in that county for a certain period of time. So several of Lancashire's players that didn't live in or weren't born in Lancashire moved to the Lancashire League to try and qualify to play for Lancashire.
Mm. So yeah, he makes his Test debut during the 01-02 series in Australia, and then he comes back with the team, and he were met with the 1902 Ashes series, but he only plays in a single Test, and that's the third Test at Sheffield. And he does very well. He takes 6 wickets in the first innings. Gilbert Jessop later said that, quote, "It was in the selection room that the rubber was lost." Why? So Barnes only plays one Test that series. Why did England have so many disastrous selections during the first decade of the 20th century?
Well, there's just one name responsible for that. Oh, well, two names really: Lord Hawke and
Mm,
Archie MacLaren.
mm,
They were the relative captains of Lancashire and Yorkshire. Massive rivalry had already developed for the two counties, still exists today. And Lord Hawke was the chairman of selectors, and Archie MacLaren the captain. And they both disagreed on which personnel they should have. But the selectors had the final say. Lord Hawke also, being captain of Yorkshire and thinking that Yorkshire was more important than the national team, used to withdraw his players from England sides.
mm,
And for example, in the 2001-2 tour of Australia, Yorkshire had won the county championship in 1901-1902 tour of Australia. Yorkshire had won the county championship in 1901 by a country mile. And their three main players who'd been responsible for that, Wilfred Rhodes, George Hurst, and Stanley Jackson, were all withdrawn by
mm,
Lord Hawke from McLaren's touring squad to Australia, automatically weakening that touring squad. And he did the same during the 1902 season in various games to make sure that his players were fresh for the Yorkshire team. And he did it again throughout the early 1900s, throughout the Edwardian period,
mm,
until he was unceremoniously sacked as chairman of selectors after the 1909 Australian tour of England. So
mm.
he was primarily responsible, but Archie MacLaren was also probably just as culpable of the loss of that series in 1902, because in the match at Old Trafford he decided to get one over on Lord Hawke by, out of the 12-man squad, choosing Fred Tate of Sussex instead of Schofield Hague from Yorkshire out of that 12-man squad. So Schofield Hague couldn't play for Yorkshire. He was 12th man for the England side, and Fred Tate played his one and only test, and
Mm.
it's known as Fred Tate's match. He uh, he was the last man dismissed at the end of the game, and England lost by 3 runs. And also, he dropped a vital catch in
Mm.
Australia's first innings. So combined together, Lord Hawke and Archie MacLaren were responsible for a lot of the mistakes, the series defeats that England had throughout those 1900s period.
Yeah, yeah, and poor Fred Tate. I mean, as you say, that match is known as Fred Tate's match for not a glowing performance, but I feel like his reputation was saved a generation later through his son Morris, who went on to have
Yeah.
a fairly good Test career. Still on Lord Hawke, Andy, I'm just going to quote from your book. And you write this sort of explanation about the machinations behind a lot of these team selections and the influence of Lord Hawke. So you write, Hawke gives an insight into his rather perverse attitude to England team selection when he writes, the great point is that it does not matter whether we win or lose, though we should like to win for the sake of England. He cared little for the success of the England Test team. What mattered to him was Yorkshire. And it's absolutely true, isn't it? I mean, his desire to have Yorkshire at the top of the county table and for their success really influenced all of England team selection, didn't it?
Yeah, yep, that's certainly true. And to be fair to Lord Hawke, he Yorkshire Lancashire matches, the county matches in Yorkshire, were watched by huge numbers of people, and Yorkshire, obviously the county championship matches, there were 26 of them in this period. So it was an income for the club. Um, they happened more often. So he's uh, the main point being, I don't think someone like him should never have been chairman of selectors.
Yeah.
Someone from Yorkshire or even Lancashire should never have been chairman of selectors. There were at that period far better candidates for those jobs.
Yeah, yeah. Andy, at this point of the podcast, it'd be great if you could explain a little further. You've already touched on it, but the differences the structure of the various competitions and levels of cricket in England at this time. And I'm speaking from a personal point of view, but I think also for a lot of the non-English listeners out there who might not be as familiar because every country has its different structures. But in relation how it relates to Sydney Barnes, our subject today. So there was Test cricket, which was, you could argue, the highest level to achieve, and that was at a national level. But then there was first class cricket, which usually comprised of county cricket, but also there were first class matches, which W.G. Grace often played in, like the Gentlemen or the Southern England versus Northern England had first class status. But then there was this thing called league cricket, which Sydney Barnes played in a lot and often chose that over first class cricket. So can you further explain how they all sat and why Barnes chose one over the other?
Well, in between league cricket and county cricket, there was, of course, minors counties cricket.
Mm,
And I'm not quite sure. Uh, Most of the current first class counties had already been absorbed into the county championship by then, but there were clubs like Northamptonshire and more the most recent Durham who eventually became part of the county championship. But minors counties cricket was important at the time because it was also played by county cricket second 11s. So in the fixture list of Staffordshire, where Barnes played, Lancashire seconds and Yorkshire seconds both played regularly against Staffordshire
mm,
and Sydney Barnes. And Sydney Barnes did remarkably well in these games from his last test in 1902 till he was recalled in 1906. In 1907, in 1906, he took 119 minor counties wickets. No one will ever beat that. It's just impossible, particularly with the current structure today.
mm.
But it was far and away the highest number of wickets taken. Every season, he was breaking records. Uh, and because he was taking wickets against Lancashire and Yorkshire seconds, this all filtered through to Lord Hawke, Archie McLaren. They knew that he was getting better
Mm.
since his last test appearance. And so he he was he became an automatic choice before the end of the decade. As regard league cricket as well, the Lancashire League was well known. Lots of professionals from around the country played in it. It was played in front of big crowds. These were these were clubs in old cotton towns in East Lancashire, with there were thousands of people at each game. So it was the feats of Sydney Barnes in that Edwardian period were getting known in the cricket world quite easily. They were in all the newspapers. Um, Everyone could read about them. There was a clamour for Barnes to return
Mm.
in to the Test team, which he eventually did in the tour of 1907-08.
I suppose what I'm getting at, Andy, is, and without putting too fine a point on it, is why did he choose? And if we look at other cricketers of the time, say a Wilfred Rhodes, why did Barnes choose to play so much cricket away from county cricket? Um, was it for money? Is that because he was a professional cricketer? Is that what he ultimately was driven
It,
by?
it, it was first, second, and third money.
Right.
The Just an example, the contract when he played 2 seasons of county cricket for Lancashire. At the end of 1903, he was offered a contract, £200 for the year. He was happy to have that £200 as long as Lancashire found him a job during the off season, but that wasn't included in the contract. He was tied to Lancashire for £200.
Mm,
His contract in 1904, playing for Church in the Lancashire League, was £300 plus performance bonuses
mm,
over 10 shillings for over 5 wickets, 50 runs, which the 5 wickets he was doing every weekend. There was also collections at the ground. Also, he could play for Staffordshire 1 game a week, a 2-day game, and also have a job as well.
mm.
So he was raking in the money, and he perhaps might have stayed in county cricket, but his life took a very different turn when he met a woman called Alice Taylor in 1902 while he was playing for Lancashire, and uh, um, they basically eloped together.
Mm.
And she was already married to a guy called George Taylor, and they ended up divorcing. And Barnes, in court in 1903, had to pay a huge sum of money in compensation to George Taylor.
Mm.
Remember, divorce wasn't
Yeah.
men. Uh,
It was frowned upon.
Men divorces weren't normal in this case,
Yeah.
but to for a woman to leave her husband and go with someone else, it was just completely unheard of. And the magistrates decided that Barnes had to pay this huge sum of money. It was over £300 to George Taylor.
Mm.
So he had little choice at the end of the 1903 season than to find that money, and that was through going back to league cricket.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and really underlines the point which modern writers and researchers make, is that when we look at the golden age, we often think of, it's the gentlemanly amateur, but it's just a raft of these professionals who were using it as a way for income. I mean, we think of modern cricket and the astronomical figures they're paid today in the various Indian Premier Leagues and things, but back then, these cricketers who weren't of a certain class used it as a way to stimulate their lifestyle, I suppose. And Sydney Barnes is probably, as I said in my introduction, he was almost the patron saint of it, because he knew where to make money. He knew he was good, and he could make a lifestyle from it.
He was a cricket mercenary.
Yes.
But you can ask yourself, why didn't people like Wilfred Rhodes and George Hurst at Yorkshire do the same thing?
Mm.
Or John Tildesley and Walter Brearley at Lancashire in this period do the same thing? The reason was quite simple. Working people were downtrodden. Basically, they tipped the forelock to the upper classes. They were expected to play county cricket, expected to accept. And still, at £200 a year at the time, the average wage in England at the time was about £1 a week. So £200 a year for playing cricket, a game that you love, at a top level in the country, probably appealed to people like Wilfred Rhodes and George Hurst and John Tildesley.
Mm.
But to Sydney Barnes, who valued his craft more than most, it wasn't enough. He was searching for more money, better, and not so much work. The county game was, people were playing 3-day games a week. They were travelling between venues on trains, and you could go from Old Trafford to Canterbury on a train during the night to play the next game. He didn't want to do that. He wanted a settled life where he could play a few days a week and earn more than he would playing on the county circuit for 6 months of the year.
Yeah. And in an earlier episode on this podcast, I spoke to Patrick Faraday, who wrote Wilfred Rhodes' biography. And you get the sense, certainly from Wilfred Rhodes, that all the travelling, and certainly when he also went to Australia, when Lord Hawke allowed him, of course, he would get back into into his English lifestyle, and off he'd go on a train the next day to play county cricket. It would be exhausting. So it makes sense, and also what you say about Barnes's his marriage and having to pay through the divorce probably guided him on the direction he took regarding his cricket career.
I may be gone for a long, long time, but when I go, you will know that I always find for the day.
If you're enjoying this podcast, perhaps you'd like to support it by buying me, Tom Ford, a coffee. Every little donation helps with the production costs and also inspire me to keep going. You can support by donating as little as $5. Visit buymeacoffee.com/Golden Age of Cricket. Andy, let's. I'm wary that we're, 25 minutes into the podcast, and we actually haven't spoken about Barnes the cricketer at all. So let's talk about him as a bowler. What type of bowler was he? Because it seems like if you read records, he sometimes described as a fast bowler, a medium bowler, an off cutter, a swinger, a spin bowler. He sounds quite unique. So, can you answer what sort of bowler he was, and if there is for the listeners, is there a modern equivalent of Barnes today in terms of style?
He was all that and more. He started off originally as a fast bowler, but he developed this swing and swerve of a bowler. Then he developed being able to cut the ball back. He developed these throughout. He became better and better as he went along. He wasn't like a child prodigy and who just stayed the same throughout his career. He worked on his game assiduously. I said he didn't like to play in the county cricket. He had time by playing league cricket and playing minor counties cricket. He had time to develop his skill, so that when he did eventually play on that highest stage, he was at the best of his ability. Um, as regards his any modern equivalent, I can only I've been thinking about this. I can only look at the people who took a quantity of wickets that Barnes might have took had he played the same number of tests as them. And the two people I can come up with are Jimmy Anderson,
Mm,
who's now past 700 test wickets, who started in the Lancashire League,
mm,
pretty much like Barnes did at Burnley, who when he first played county cricket, he was just everyone thought he was just fast and daft, but a lucky bowler. I remember his first one-day international game. He got 5 wickets against Australia, but his 5 wickets came with long hops and short balls down the leg side and everything. But he gradually became a better bowler, being able to swing the ball both ways and everything. And he is very much from that same school of Lancashire League thinking and working on your game. And of course, he hasn't played much county cricket because he's basically been central
mm.
contracted for many years. So he has been able to go on as long as Barnes did, for example. The other person that I would say in modern terms, in terms of developing different types of delivery, is Shane Warne.
Mm.
Shane Warne, I watched endless videos of Shane Warne. He didn't just bowl leg spinners, he could bowl flippers, deuceras, he could swerve the ball. He bowled differently in different conditions. I once was at Hampshire's ground um, before it closed when he was captain of Hampshire, watching him practice in the nets, and the number of different deliveries he was producing was just uncanny. And this was towards the end of his Test career, and he, his ability to improve his game and to develop different types of delivery for different batsmen was exactly the same as what Sydney Barnes did back in the early 20th century.
Yeah, and you could argue that Warne's had a relatively long career as well, especially considering his lifestyle, which got out of hand a few times. But he was
Yeah,
playing T20 cricket in Australia, I think, until he was almost 40 or was
he
40.
was, he
So
was playing in India. He was one of the
yeah,
original IPL players, IPL captains.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So Andy, in your book, you dedicate a good chunk of one chapter to the Barnes ball, or you call it the Barnes ball. Can you describe what this delivery actually was?
Well, the term the Barnes ball was coined by Neville Cardus many years afterwards, based on reports he'd heard from Australia and from when he played in the county championship with Lancashire. Apparently, he was he was practicing during a game between Lancashire and Derbyshire, and he managed to work out how to swing the ball away and spin it back through the batsman. So, and this is the delivery which became his stock delivery, which decimated Australia in the 1911-12 series in Australia, and which Cardus termed the Barnes ball.
Hmm. Yeah.
Don't forget, at the same time, there were many innovations in the game. Bertie Bosanquet,
Yes.
after but in 1903-04, Bertie Bosanquet went to Australia as a bit of a mystery bowler, and he was the first googly bowler, the first bowler who could spin the ball away and make it
Make it
turn the
look.
other
Uh,
backwards.
and
Yeah, yeah,
of course, it became known as the Bosey for a while
yeah,
before the wrong'un and the googly term came in. Of
yeah.
course, so you've mentioned it already, Andy. The sort of departure of Barnes from county cricket, or at least from Lancashire. I'm just going to. This is at the end of the 1903 season. I'm going to read a report which you included in your book, which was written by Wisden at the time. So this is what they wrote regarding Barnes leaving Lancashire. Before the summer was over, Barnes' connection with the Lancashire club came to an end. He declined to sign the usual form promising his services for 1904, and in consequence, he was left out of the team in the last match. It was stated that he had accepted an offer from the Church Club and would return to Lancashire League cricket. His defection caused quite a sensation and was commented on in rather bitter terms. Temperament is a great thing in a cricketer, and in this respect, Barnes has always been deficient. If he had possessed the enthusiasm for the game that characterised Barlow or Briggs, he might have made a great name for himself, his natural gifts as a bowler being so remarkable, which is really inflammatory language by Wisden at the time. You know, they used the word defection, as you point out in your book, and it really shows what the establishment, the cricket establishment at the time, thought of Barnes, who didn't want to play for Lancashire. Do you think Barnes was out of line here, not wanting to play for Lancashire?
I think he possibly in the back of his mind he wanted to play. He was off some terms. He said they're not good enough. I want more, and because he um, wasn't offered he was offered the terms as every other player, but he thought he was worth more. He'd had a very good season in 2003, 131 wickets. He was very high up in the national averages. He In his first season at Lancashire in 1902, he'd taken 80 odd wickets but missed several games because he'd become injured in Australia during his first tour there in 01-02. So he still took over 80 wickets. So he thought that he was only going to get better and he wanted better terms. But Lancashire weren't able to offer any better. They offered their professionals exactly the same rate of pay, whoever they were, and whatever their contribution to the team was. It's just only a pity that 5 or 6 years later, Wisden didn't print an apology for that particular message.
Yeah, that's true. Perhaps they could do one today, perhaps as a retrospective. Now, we've touched on it already, and we will certainly talk about it more, but and without any spoilers for listeners, but Barnes does end up having a very long career. He plays cricket well late into his life. And his ability to, I suppose, bounce from various teams and leagues may have put him in good stead. And there's a quote in your book from Plum Warner, who says, and I quote, "There can be little doubt that Barnes profits by playing comparatively little cricket, which enables him to keep fresh and to come to each match full of energy and life." Do you agree with this quote in terms of Barnes's longevity?
Yeah, and absolutely. And, as I say, he was playing 1 2 day game for Staffordshire a week. He was playing league cricket on Saturdays and Sundays. So he was playing 4 days, still playing a lot of cricket, but he was getting that valuable rest in between.
Mm.
As I mentioned before, a county cricketer will be been playing 6 of the 7 days and travelling long journeys
Mm.
by train, changing trains all the time. It which was a difficult life over 6 months. You had to be very strong to do that, and lots of county cricketers didn't last as long as people, for example, like Wilfred Rhodes, and certainly no one lasted longer than Sydney Barnes at the high level of the game.
Yeah. Um, we have already touched on his personality and how it could be cantankerous or prickly. Um, He himself actually described himself in certain terms, or he once said, and I quote, "I was a difficult man to play with. I did my best at all times and expected the others to do the same." Do you think when we think about this quote, and as you know a lot about his career, do you think he simply possessed the more modern approach to sport, which was to win at all costs?
I think he was thoroughly professional. I mean, there was a bit in my book when someone describes the corner of this changing room. They had various embrocations and various things that he did to keep his fingers supple and his limbs supple and everything. You know, it was just like a doctor's surgery. One corner of the changing room, but in this corner of the changing room, he he applied the most modern methods he could and the modern methods of training. He had the physical abilities. He was tall for that age. He had a good physique. He wasn't overweight. He ate well. He drank, but only in moderation. Like he smoked, but only in moderation. He um he 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 developed a professional cricketer's life and and did all the right things to make his career last as long as it could. He was the archetypal sportsman of the time, and yes, it it's certainly the way he approached the game certainly smacks more of the end of the 20th century than the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. He just sounds like a smart individual, really. I mean, he knew how to
Yeah.
take care of his body. As you say, he smoked a little, but when you look at what all the other cricketers were doing at the time, I mean, they were literally posing team photos holding a pipe. Often the pipes were in their mouth as well. So to smoke a little was almost not smoking at all.